Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee. This morning I'm going to be talking about discipline. We live in a world that is so much different than when I grew up. When I grew up, you did something wrong, you got a spanking. It was none of this timeout stuff. And I'm not talking about beating a child. I'm talking about a good old-fashioned spanking. But as time went on, a new generation came up. And I'm sure you can remember this when everybody started talking about it. This new generation came up, and what was the one thing that they started to say? That was spanking a child will teach them to hit. Really? Really? If you're spanking your child, I guarantee they already know how to hit. And it's more than likely as to why they're being spanked to begin with. You know, and I like what Brad Stein says. He says it's better to be spanked at age 6 than paying a bail bonds at age 16. That just makes so much sense. In Proverbs 13:24, it says, whoever spares the rod hates his child, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Now, this rod that they're talking about in here is spanking your child. So if you truly love your child, you want to see them succeed, right? You want this to learn morals, you want them to learn discipline, you want them to learn all of that. And this is what that is saying. If you love your child, you're going to discipline them, you're going to spank them, and you're going to teach them the right way. It's not easy to discipline your child, to spank them. But God gave us that task. And it's a tough task to nurture them and to guide them into being decent people. You think that we are responsible for these small people, for an infant, to raise them up, to teach them all the right things that they need to learn. We are responsible for that and how they are to be as adults. That's a huge task that God has given us. A lack of discipline shows our lack of concern for our children, a lack of concern for the development of their character as to the type of people that they become. And a spanking is going to teach a kid respect. It's going to teach them boundaries, responsibility. It's going to give them wisdom. And in Proverbs 29:15, it says, the rod and reproof of wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. It's so important to not to spare the rod. Spanking your child is not going to hurt them. But when we think about when spankings went by the wayside, you had the whole group of people, that coming generation that kept preaching to everybody, oh, you spank your child, that's going to teach them to hit. But then what happened when the spankings went by the wayside? Because everybody jumped on board with this new, don't spank your child, they're going to learn how to hit. What happened? Children began hitting their parents. They began talking back to the parents. They began biting and kicking and throwing things. All of that became and developed because people stopped spanking their children. So no, spanking your child did not teach them how to hit. Or Proverbs 22:15 says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from them. So basically, when spankings went by the wayside, what did that do? It proved God's word right again. Because, God's word told us this was written how many thousands of years ago, that it tells us that we need to discipline our child. We need to spank our children. Because when we do, that's going to drive that rebellion far from them. And So we need to make sure that we are disciplining our children and not sparing the rod. It's God's word, as we find out, is what it was, how many thousands of years ago. It is the same today, and it will be the same forever. So kids, they do foolish things, they do dangerous things. And why is that? Because they don't understand consequences. And and so, I mean, kids just they're not born with common sense. None of us were born with common sense. This is something that must be taught to a child. Wisdom is taught from a child, and it must come from the rod of discipline. Once again, that rod of discipline, yes, is spanking your child, not beating them, but spanking them. Putting a child in timeout, that's not a consequence. I mean, how many times have you heard a patient said, you need to go sit down? And the child has no understanding as to what they just did wrong. And they're like, why? Here comes the back talk. Why do I need to do that? Oh, you know what you did. Well, no, they don't. They don't know what you did, and you can tell them, but that means nothing to them. You must give them a consequence for their action. And that is what the good Lord created your backside for. It wasn't just to sit on. Oh, Proverbs 23:13 and 14 says, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish him with the rod, he will not die. Punish him with the rod and save his soul from death. You see, spanking your child is not going to hurt them. It's not going to kill them. And not only that, from everything that they are taught, you're saving that child's soul from death. Because if you don't, like we've already talked about, they start hitting, they kicking, they biting, and all that is disrespect. They don't know any morals. Because when the spankings went by the wayside, people forgot about God. They forgot about what his word says about discipline. They forgot about morals, and then they didn't have any. So people had to start making up their own morals as they went. And now look at the condition of the children today from being put in timeouts, or children who did not get disciplined correctly. Parents, they fear that, well, if I discipline my child, if I spank my child, they're going to resent me. No, it's quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Children, they need the proper discipline to grow mentally strong, to learn respect, to learn responsibility, to be responsible for their actions. And a lot of parents, want to make all the decisions for their children. And that is not healthy for your child. I have people who are in their 30s. I even have a few in their 40s that come into the office, come into their doctor's appointments, still yet with their mother, so that their mother can make their medical decisions for them. And you talk about overbearing there, that is not healthy for a child. The age of 30 and 40, the child should be responsible for making their own decisions. But on the other hand, you have parents who want their children to make all the decisions for themselves. Well, this is why children have parents, so the parents can guide them in making those decisions for the child. Yes, children do need to make some decisions, but for the most part, the parents need to make the decisions for the children so that the children can learn. They can learn what is the right way to go. And both ways there are very unhealthy for the child. And they don't teach the children responsibility, that doesn't give the child wisdom. What it teaches them is selfishness. And that is all that they're going to get. So you spare the rod and spoil the child. Hmm. So Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not forget their teachings. So when you train up a child in the way they should go, you're disciplining them, you're teaching them. Some parents, well, you just got to tell your child. Well, telling your child doesn't teach them consequence, does it? No, you discipline your child. You have to discipline your child, and that comes from the rod. So it teaches them, you know, how to make wise decisions, how to be responsible, how to take responsibility for their own actions, and not to push it off on everybody else. Now, I could do a whole morning coffee and just taking responsibility for oneself. But they don't learn that if your child has not been properly disciplined, And when they are older, not just old, and I don't mean as an old person, I'm talking about when they are mature, they will know. They will know how to be morally correct people. They'll know how to be godly people. They'll know responsibility. They'll know boundaries. They'll know respect. They'll have wisdom. They'll have knowledge. God's word is so great. I mean, it covers everything and it tells us exactly how to do these things, how to properly to be people, how to properly train our children, how to do that. He gives us the tools to do it with. So basically, bottom line here is that we need to get back to the basics. We need to get back to God's word. We need to begin raising up new generations of people according to God's word. Getting back to the basics is getting back to God's word, and that's what we need to do. So, and I know a lot of you out there are probably asking yourself the same question, so I'll answer it for you. Yes, I did spank my children. And I have some wonderfully awesome kids today. They know responsibility. They have morals. They have good morals. They take responsibilities for their actions. They have the wisdom, they have the knowledge. They're great kids. So let's all get back to the basics and start raising up new generations according to God's word. Thank you so much for listening today. I love you all. And until next time, goodbye.